Okay, so we're live on Facebook. Welcome to Remco. We're doing today our co-creative-sex dialogues. As the people who've been following me for a while know, we've been dealing with this whole theme around shame, body shame, in all its different permutations, different types of people, different ways it gets expressed. But one thing in common is that it actually does have an impact on people's lives. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Julie Archibald, the author of The Sex Up Your Life, The Mind-Blowing Path to True Intimacy, Healing, and Hope. And I also do some online series and different journeys to help people really get connected to themselves as the first priority over everything else. And so I'm really excited by, I actually don't know Remco very well, but I saw his fabulous work of creation and entrepreneurship, and I'm a fan of really beautiful spaces. And then I saw one of his posts where he was talking about something that he had just, for the first time in his life, revealed on social media. And maybe for the first time kind of revealed something about himself, about how he felt really ashamed of something that happened to his body, and was revealing it for the first time. And so I was like, hey, and he also said he was really interested in sharing his stories and a whole new kind of phase. And I was very excited to see and dig in with him a little bit. Because, you know, it's always, I think it's super important in this world today to really get a picture of how much we all share this common thing around body shame, and men as well, and successful men. It plays in so many different arenas, and I just wanted to give it a voice, and I thought Remco would be a great person to bring us down that journey. So welcome. If there's anything you'd like to introduce yourself that I haven't said properly or you'd like to add, just go for it.
No, I think you summed it up. Yeah, I just had a sort of a revelation one day, and I thought, the hell with it. So yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah. So what's really cool, I'll just give a little more context to those who don't know Remco. He's a sort of self-made man, from what I understood, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but he built up Marinaview homes and Neatfreakz constructions. And maybe you can just give us a little bit of the picture of all that you've built in the world, just to really get a sense of, like, you know, the impact that you've had and who you are, before we go into the more of the intimate stuff.
I think I'm the product of an ADD child. So actually, I know I am. So I had no idea what I wanted to be. I know what I wanted to do. I'm a big person, and my neighbor grabbed me one day and took me to a construction site, and I liked that. So I went into architecture, I went into building, I went into construction. I got bored. I bought retail stores. I revamped them. I built new stores. I sold them. And then I got into residential building. And so things just sort of spiraled. And yeah, I like a lot of variety. So it keeps my mind going. I have one of those minds that, yeah, we'll go off at 3 a.m. and I'll start to think, where's my passport? And I don't know why. It just does. So yeah. That's the way I'm wired, and it's good. It's tiring, but it's good. Yeah.
What like, because there's kind of also a very creative side of you, and I was just curious, like, what for you has been your most favorite creation of all the different things that you've done?
I like to write, and I don't put it out there, and I kind of keep that quiet and personal. And so I write stories for my son, and I write stories for him when he goes through issues and doesn't know how to deal with them. So how to make friends, or how to get over scary monsters, those kind of things. So I enjoy that because it's creative. I like to build pictures, and I like to build. So if you can create something in someone's mind, I feel that's the greatest way to make a connection. And with building, it's very similar. Like, you walk into a space that we've created, and you get it or you don't, and it's an instant connection. And I like that. People see what you see, then makes me feel good. So I get I get a lot of joy out of, I guess, responses from other people.
Yeah.
So,
Like kind
yeah,
of going into the spaces and then getting on the same wavelength of the creation and then creating it. And then people
yeah,
be so like blown out of their, blown out of the water to see like, wow, this is my home, or, this is a space that I can have my business in, or things like that.
yeah. I mean, and it feels nice, right? To know someone's enjoying something that you created or you created with them. That's a wonderful feeling, right? I mean, they're there for 10, 15 years, and I don't know, I don't want to sound like a narcissist, but when they walk around the house, they see you, and at the same time, I feel like I'm still giving. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah, you're like a
yeah,
contribution to their life,
yeah, yeah. You made a change, so
Yeah. I
that's
really
nice.
get the whole piece around space, because space is really what makes you, it's like the space in which you like who you are and what you're doing. It's really, it's where you feel good. There's a whole, communication that's happening when we realize it, and it
Yeah,
can really
it
transform people's lives.
yeah, yeah. If you can create something that they feel comfortable in, then you you've done your job, right?
Yeah.
And that makes me feel good. So yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I'd say that's one way of putting it. I don't
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put it. It makes me feel good to be. I always like people's stories, and I've always liked people's older people, grandparents, when they share. And to be able to give something back is nice, because I feel like now I've become part of their story, and
Mm.
that's that's ultimately a wonderful thing. Yeah.
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 Like it sounds like, yeah, you're looking for that sense of like connection and being part of something, be part of that bigger family, and
Yeah.
yeah, that bigger kind of
And you
community.
do. I mean, I'm working with a client now, a 75-year-old Asian lady, and I call her Mama. And I help her realize what she wants, and I make it come to fruition. And and she smiles, and that lights me up. So
Right.
yeah, I feel like I'm part of their family, and many times they treat you like that. I've been to multiple Thanksgivings and Christmases and
Yeah.
fishing trips, and yeah, just so they
Like
just
human connection is super important.
it's very important. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, to understand somebody's needs and desires and wants, you need to understand the person, and so it's an intimate relationship, because you understand them and they understand you, and they see you working to achieve that, and is a bond. So
Yeah.
it's nice. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so let's go dig a little deeper into some of the themes that we talked about. So yeah, basically, it seems like, like I was writing in the post, if you look at your life on Facebook, there's all these beautiful photos, all these great things happening, and yet there's this photo of you where you decide to take your shirt off, and you're like, this is probably the first time I've actually shown myself without my shirt on.
Yeah.
So what actually was behind that? Like, why was that such a big issue for you?
Well, okay, so I hope they're not listening, but so I have a friend who's the same age as me, and he is a little more challenged with the way he's aging and the way he's looking, and I never really thought too much about it. And I was cleaning my son's bathroom, and I was in my jeans, and I looked at myself and I thought, for your age, you're in decent shape, and I don't know why you're so shy. And I had this, I guess, conversation with myself, and I was like, I should be more proud, and yet I'm not. I don't know. I feel like a certain insecurity with it, and
Mhm.
I don't know why. And I always have, and I never really overcame that. I never really sought help for that, and I guess people should. So I thought, well, you got to start somewhere, and for some reason, I just took two pictures and thought, the hell of it, I'm going to throw it out there, and I wrote a little story with it, and yeah, it was sort of impulsive, and I don't normally do that. And at the same time, I got such a response, and I thought, okay, that's
People
that's
want to hear
great.
the real deal.
Yeah, yeah. And I had people say, "Holy, there's a human behind that person." Someone. I didn't know you actually thought those things. And I was like, yeah, I've been thinking, I've been stressed out about the way I looked since I was 9 years old. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Well,
And
maybe you could
it's a different,
share. Go for it.
yeah, I think it's a different time too, because my son is 9 years old. He'll be 9. And I now look at the world through his eyes. And when he sees someone who looks different or has isn't physically exactly the same as everyone else, or is in a wheelchair, his perception is so very different than when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, I had to wear a suit, a flesh-colored suit called a Job suit, and it was really tight to compress scars so that you wouldn't have big puffy scars. But you had to wear this thing for 2 years, and it was very noticeable. I had a mask on and a plastic shield on and a rubber insert, and
Well,
yeah,
maybe
kids.
just before you go into that,
Yeah,
because people don't maybe haven't read like what happened to you. So, what happened to you at age 8 years old?
I was in Langley at the time, and the city was pulling down an old preschool, and they had cut the school in half. It was like a big portable or double-sided portable, and I could squeeze in there, and I found some chemicals they left behind, and one of them was called methyl hydrate. And the methyl hydrate had this like explosion sign on the side of it, the warning signs. But then it said inflammable. I thought, inflammable? Does that mean you can't burn? Then why would it have an explosion sign? And like every 9-year-old kid, they happen to have a pack of matches on them because, matches are cool. So I wandered off to an old stump at Portage Park, and this stump was all hollowed out, and I made myself a little fire and poured it on, and let me tell you, it blew. So, yeah, I ended up doing some serious damage and jumped in the Nickelmackle River, and didn't really feel anything at first, just very cold and scared, and ran home to my mom's delight. And yeah, spent good 2 years of physiotherapy, and yeah,
So, what happened to your skin?
I burned 27% of my body,
Was it
mostly
like
from the waist up.
was it like a sort of a liquid that came onto your skin, or gas, or what was it that burnt it?
Well, when I poured it on, it shot into the can like a big bright white blue flame, and the can exploded.
Okay.
So it pretty much just caught me. Yeah. And a lot of other things. The stump is still there to this day. It's still charred.
Wow. So you
Yeah.
ran home and your mom saw you, and
Yeah.
then like when you went to
Uh,
the doctor, like what was the diagnostic? Like what happened to your body?
well, I ended up in the Langley Memorial Hospital, and they couldn't deal with the extensive damage because 27% was third degree. So there was a lot of second degree and first degree burns. And then they shipped me off to the VGH. And at the time, Vancouver General had the best program for burns, and people from all across Canada were in the burn unit. And there was a lot of people like myself there. It's a lot of it's a scary place. That's all I can say. They did things to you in there you don't want to remember.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
won't get into those.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you talked about like skin grafts and like physiotherapy, like where your bones broke it or muscles, like what happened to do
No, so
therapy?
there's like scar tissue
Oh,
underneath my arm. So as scar tissue grows, it tightens. So for quite a few years, I needed to hang from like a bar and stretch my skin, in essence. Which, when they talk about people on a rack and they're stretching their skin in medieval days, for me that was every morning and every evening, and it was not enjoyable. And my poor father made me do it, and thankfully I did because now I have full mobility. But yeah, it wasn't fun.
So
No.
even like the arms movements and everything to just keep
Yeah.
everything nimble.
Mobile.
Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, it just stretches to the point where you can no longer move it, and
Yeah.
it becomes nasty. So,
So what was the reaction of your classmates when you went back to school?
well, that took a while. Um, let's just say kids back then were great at calling names, and that sat with me for a while. And
Mind
that, I
mentioning
think,
the names if you feel comfortable. You're always
well,
saying
because I
no.
had this, there was a song at the time. What was that song? I think it was like Dirty Laundry was the song. So they changed the words from dirty laundry to dirty underwear, and that's what I wore on my head. And, you know, there are other things. Scars aren't the prettiest, and, you get the names. So
Yeah.
you sort of just, yeah, it was a tough time.
Those are really strong impressions on an 8 and 9 year old boy, for that period. It's like you're so open and like,
You go through the why
fixing
me's.
your identity.
I think I said to my mom every day, why me? Like, why me? But why not? I mean, it makes you who you are. But yeah, it's weird that, 40 years later, you still you still have that mental image of those kids' eyes, right? You still
Yeah.
see those people staring at you.
It's still,
And
you're
at six
still,
foot
you
three
still
and
feel vulnerable.
213 pounds, I stand out at 6'3". So, if I take my shirt off, it's noticeable. But I think society has changed. They're a lot more forgiving. And I think that's where it's like, okay, so if they can, why can't I? You
Right.
know? So I thought, all right,
Yeah, it's time to like liberate the chest.
let it out. So I haven't done much liberating since then.
But does your body still have scar tissue, or is it pretty much healed now?
Oh no, the scars never go away.
Okay.
I mean, I have one scar that looks like the wing of an eagle. It's that big around the back, and yeah, it's very noticeable. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so there's the first phase with the kids looking at you. Were there like other moments that were kind of like these traumatic impressions because of this experience?
Well, it makes you a little shy, you know. Um, you think, because I have this image of myself, which is probably not the best, that other people have this image. And so when it comes to like meeting other people, you tend to be a little shy on that end of it all, which is not great, but
Almost like you don't feel like you're kind of on shaky ground, like you're not sure how they're going to take it, so you're not like as cocky and confident.
not, yeah, I worry about the rejection, right? Like, it's like, I don't want to be that freak. I want someone to, like, yeah,
Receive you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
how was it then, like as you became a teenager?
Well, okay, so I had a group of friends I developed, and, you know, they would always say, we don't even see it anymore. Like, we just see you.
Yeah.
And they, people say that to you, but you still see that 9-year-old you. So it's,
Yeah, that filter's still there, right?
oh yeah, yeah. That's one way of putting it. So I just have always hid it. I know I'll wear a shirt, and you can see the, scars on my neck a little bit. You can see it on my chin, and all right, it's okay. It's not that bad. It's noticeable, but yeah, I carried around this self-image that shouldn't be there, and yet it is.
Mm-hmm. 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 So when do you feel like it started? Like, is it just really recently you feel like you're kind of emancipating yourself from it, or do you feel like it's like a long process over time?
Well, you meet people as you go, and oddly enough, you meet the opposite sex, and sometimes they say they think scars are sexy, and I just look at them like they're crazy. Um, I don't get that at all. So I think there's a problem with them and not me. Maybe it's me. And you hear it from enough people that you've known for so long, and they've all said the same thing. We don't, we don't see it. We see you. But and then recently I'm like, well, why am I the only one that sees it? Right.
Yeah.
So maybe, all this, childhood trauma and name calling and those few years, you just gotta let it go, right? And
Yeah.
be proud,
Yeah.
wear it with honor. Like, yeah, so everybody goes through things, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has issues. And I think if you normalize it or vocalize it, I thought, well, then they won't be so insecure about their issues or their particular problems or their mind visualizing their own problems. And I think we live in a world where everybody wants to be commercially perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not. And
Mm-hmm.
we should just be who we are and own it. And I felt like I had never owned it, and I should. So yeah, all that while scrubbing toothpaste spit out of the sink. you know? So, and then I just went and did it and shared a little bit. And yeah, I had
Really good
people,
feedback.
yeah, lots of aunts and uncles and family members like, you really think that? And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's weird. Then when you hear it, it's just like, okay, yeah, time to.
Yeah, I just find it so interesting how, we really can put ourselves in these prisons. Like maybe there's an initial trauma, there's messages that we receive that could be traumatic from other people. Maybe there's bullying, maybe there's name calling, whatever it is. And it puts us in a prison. And then at one point you're walking along with this in this prison, but no one else sees that prison that you're in and you're suffering. And people see
Yeah,
you successful, they see you doing this and that, or like, wow, it must be so easy for Remco.
yeah, yeah. And you get that. Like, even like my mom always says, she goes, "You're the one child that I never ever had to worry about. I knew you would always make it. You'd always be good. You'd always land on your feet. You'd always do great things." And it was just weird. It's weird hearing everybody's, version of me, and then listening to my own version of me. And I mean, I carry that in my work too. I'm very detailed oriented because I want everything to be perfect, because maybe I don't have that feeling of myself. So I want to put that in something that I've done. And that's great for work, but I should work on that part of me. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so it only took me half a century to realize it. And yeah, I just
And
want to put that away.
yeah. And how did that start shifting for you? Like, when you start making this realization and you start realizing, no, I should actually appreciate myself, or I should start loving myself, or not being worried about it.
Yeah.
Does that take like all this tension away from you? Like, does
No,
it
it's extremely
relax
hard.
you?
It's very difficult. I find it phenomenal. I'm very hard on me. And
Yes.
and and then I think everybody's hard on themselves. But yeah, I could be a little nicer to myself. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem walking through a room of people and talking about things, but when it comes to me being vulnerable to somebody else, that's when it becomes difficult.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
So
how do you explain that? Like, why is that part difficult?
I don't know. I think I don't I don't know. I just find it tough. I haven't got that far yet. I've just started.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
helping. Thanks. Thanks.
um, well, yeah, I just find it really interesting what you said about that, there's this part of you that, is so hard on yourself, and having other people mention things to you, sort of bounces off you, and even that whole piece of you needing to compensate, like almost this feeling, okay, I'm not good, quote unquote, I'm not good enough. So I almost have to compensate by proving over and over again how perfect or how good. Do you think that happened in that moment?
Oh, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, yeah. I mean, I worry about all the small details because I feel like the details of me aren't perfect.
Yeah.
So I just find, but I mean, that's good in my line of work.
Yeah.
But
well, I'm just curious, is this something like a family value? Did you grow up like that? Was it something before that you were very detailed, or did it really start with this?
no, I always noticed things, right? I was very observant,
Mm-hmm.
but um, when I look at my work in comparison to other people's, my clients say, you know, you put a lot of effort into very small details, and I think it adds up in the bigger picture, right? So I think there's always been that part of me, and it's just all of that wrapped up into one. I mean, I need to be maybe grateful that happened because it made me who I am to a certain degree,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time, it owns me at the same time, which
Yeah,
is
like it could be a bit
tough.
of an obsession or a struggle, constantly not getting that moment of like relaxation, of like of completion or happiness. It's like there's always a bit of a tension.
There's a bit touching. That's a
Yeah.
good way to put it. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, so how was teenagehood, like when it was like people were going out and dating and all this? Was that like a hard period for you, or?
Oh, that didn't happen. I would go out with my friends, and I was the best wingman because
Right.
I'm a good talker,
Yeah.
and I'm not shy, as long as I'm not, you know, the one putting myself out there. I doesn't concern me. So my friends would take me, and they would say, "Let's go over to that group of girls. I want you to like introduce me." And sure, that was great. But
And you saw
yeah, I
the guys
didn't.
walking up with the girls?
No problem, because I didn't feel the pressure. It wasn't about me. It was always about them. So it was great. And yeah, my job was to take out the mother hen, right? And it was to go in and you know, make the introductions, and I didn't have a problem with that. I just, yeah, it made me shy about being intimate with someone because I didn't know how they would feel about me. So I was in my 20s before I started to see anyone.
Right.
So through high school,
Kind
I
of like
just
this
had
major kind of like like shields of protection, armor to like make sure
that's
you
a
don't have
big wall.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Nah, that's okay.
And yeah, I mean people have different kinds of armor that they put on. You had a very physical skin situation that was like you needed to protect, like even you were saying in that post that you created, that even like your skin hadn't, felt wind and water that much. And I was
Yeah.
like that was such a strong imagery when you talk about like being a good writer. I was like, that moment was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of time,
Yeah.
that's a lot of hiding.
It's a lot of hiding. I was always jealous of people who could just pull their shirts off and walk around and just feel, you know, great. And I just never allowed myself that because of what I thought. And, you know, I guess I'm wrong, right? I should not worry about whether the people think. I should worry about how I feel. And I'm a great advocate for telling other people that, and I'm the worst person for
Hmm.
doing it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, those sensations of, you know, swimming in shorts in the ocean or in a lake, or just going for a hike with my dog and walking in a pair of shorts rather than in a sweaty t-shirt when it's hot out. You know, I'd much rather feel the breeze than my t-shirt clinging to me. And I robbed myself of those experiences, and I shouldn't. And
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, they're very sensorial like descriptions, it's like,
I don't go to RMTs because I don't want other people to massage me. Do you know? Like,
yeah, you don't like
and
to be
everybody talked
touched,
about it.
maybe.
I just sit there. I would sit there I would be very tense, and it wouldn't be because, it would be because of myself, you know?
Yeah. No,
And
that's
so that,
really, yeah. I shouldn't, I don't know if I should be saying this, but maybe I won't say who it is. I know someone who, they're very sensitive about their hair because there's hair, I guess they were losing their hair at one point, and anyone like touching their hair was like really irritating to them. Whereas I know that for myself, like I love getting my head touched, But like someone like, yeah, so like someone like you that like had this traumatic thing happen to your skin, like getting it touched is like a real stressor rather than pleasure.
Yeah, I just, I just stresses me out.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And
it's odd.
what stresses you out? Is it like the thought of rejection, or is it the thought of like it's gonna hurt you? Like
No,
what
it's
is
not,
it?
they don't hurt, and they're the opposite of hurt. Like if I'm at a job site and I walk between some studs and the nail sticking out and I slice one, I don't feel it. Usually someone will say, hey Remco, you're bleeding all over the place before I notice it. And
Okay.
so the hurt's not there. For me, it's just, it's being able to relax enough to
Yeah.
enjoy. And I mean, everybody loves to be touched, but
Not everyone.
no, no. Okay, but
but,
a lot of people like a
usually
massage.
but
Yeah.
usually it's attached to something when you really don't like to get touched. Usually there's something attached to it, you know?
Yeah, so I don't have a fear of like, playing sports with guys and that kind of touching. I have a fear of like somebody's hands. I feel like if I'm going to a massage, I'm paying them to touch me when probably they don't want to, and that's my own. So I can't let myself relax. So the whole idea is to lay there and relax. Or if you're with somebody, I'd rather do the touching than being touched. So
Mhm. So
it takes me a while to let that guard down.
yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that you're really good at giving, but not good
100%
at
giver.
receiving?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
hard one.
I'm much happier seeing somebody else receive than, yeah. I mean, it's nice, but yeah. Yeah.
Just imagine that scar tissue that's in the way of like being able to receive. You know, it's gonna dissolve one day. You'll be like overwhelmed with what receiving feels like.
I might not be ready for it. It's like, I got like 40 years of dealing with it. So, yeah.
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 Like you
And
said, yeah.
I went a couple of years back, 2.5 years ago. I had a root canal done, and they left a drill bit inside, and that gave me an infection that went through my body, and they put me on this drug called prednisone. So it like lowered my immune system, but it had another side effect, and it makes you pretty emotional. And I was off the drug now for over a year. It took a long time to get off this drug. But what didn't go away were these feelings and emotions. And for me, it was, 40 years of not having and putting away all these emotions. And then
Hmm.
this crazy drug all of a sudden threw them all into my face at one time. And I can remember
Wow.
sitting on my couch with my son and watching this show where some dog ran away, and I just started bawling. I
Yeah.
had no control. And so I said to my rheumatologist, like, 6 months ago already, because she does checkups every want to make sure I'm still okay. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I said, but I still have all these emotions. And she's like, well, get used to it. It's good to have emotions. And I'm like, I'm not used to emotions. I don't, you know, I've
There was a bit of a
I've buried
numbing
them.
happening your whole life to deal with life. Like even your body was numbed in a way.
Yeah, it's a lot of work trying to figure out 40 years worth of emotions all of a sudden, and it's like
That's a good way of putting it.
that. It's a rush, and it's, yeah. So seeing that, I had these emotions, whereas 3-4 years ago, I wouldn't have looked twice. It just would have said, yeah, whatever. And now I sort of look deeper into things. So
Mm,
yeah, myself included.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how has how this like impacted your writing? Because that must bring in like a whole dimension of like where you can express yourself.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think for me, it's painting pictures of how you feel. So having a rush of feelings and being very, how do I put it, uh, detail orientated, you can express that through pen easily, a lot easier than speaking, because you have a sort of, uh, I don't know, a safety net.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same with putting that picture on my post. I'm behind a camera and no one's actually in front of me. So there's a certain amount of bravery that comes with that.
Yes.
And to do that in front of people, I don't know if I'd have that same courage. And when I write, I can put all these feelings down and try to make people understand how I feel. And it's kind of wonderful.
Yeah.
Because I can't, I'm not at a point where I can express that.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying,
Yeah.
but on paper, it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
It's safe.
could you give us an example of something recently that you've written where you feel like that happened?
Okay. Well, with my son, when he was scared of monsters, I didn't know how to deal with it. So I wrote a story how monsters were actually scared of him, and they dressed in these scary costumes, because underneath these costumes they were goodies. So if it was a brown monster, inside this brown costume was chocolate. And the reason he comes out with like scary monsters, because he doesn't want you to know he's chocolate, and he doesn't want to be eaten by you because he's in fear of you. So he hides in this. And if it's a purple monster, it's like grape soda. And I wrote this story about all these things. And if you caught one of these monsters, right, then you could pull off his disguise and see that. And so I basically gave him a giant butterfly net, and he sat in bed with it. And of course, no monsters came back anymore, because he was now in charge. So, I mean, you need to paint these pictures of how these monsters feel about, my son, knowing that he would be consumed by him. And it was a change of power for him. And at the same time, he could now visualize that these things were, were frightened of him and were at his mercy and not the other way around. And
Yeah.
it was a game changer. So I had fun with that.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things I wrote, and made such an impact. And I've given it to other parents, and they've read it to their kids, and they said they love it, right? And it's yeah.
Well, I think it's so great because I mean, the number of people I know that can really have almost like this really harsh outside, and they can be intense, and then you realize that down deep inside they're just this really mushy, loving, tender person that they have to protect.
Well, okay, so I my electrician today, she said, because you called to give me the heads up warning, which I appreciate, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm not nothing. And she's like, "What?" So I started to talk a bit about it. She's like, "You mean to tell me underneath that big, bald, Aryan-looking body, you've got emotions?" I'm like, "Oh God."
Here it goes again.
Yeah. And she says, "You know what, Remco, I know that already." I'm like, right? So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Nope.
I've had people tell me that I have like a serious look, or, intimidating look. And I think it's because I have lack of hair, but they're just being prejudiced against people without hair. I don't know. So, yeah, I mean, I see myself very differently than the way other people see me.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's such a good point because I mean, I've interviewed models and I've interviewed all kinds of different people, and they can look from the outside like their lives are perfect or they have this everything going for them, and then you interview them and you discover the craziness of what they went through in their lives, and how whether it be that, and or even this idea of like how much pressure they put on themselves for their bodies or what they receive because of their bodies. And it's just amazing to think too that like sometimes we look at certain categories of people and we're like, that person has it all made or it's all easy for them, and yet they have their own demons that they're struggling with, and it just takes different qualities.
It does. And I can see that in some people, right? And there's a certain amount of empathy for that. And I think one of my friends told me once, she was always, she still is, but extremely attractive. And she says, sometimes being extremely attractive is difficult because people don't approach you. as genuinely or as nicely as you would want them to. And I never thought about that, right? They were intimidated or they didn't feel good enough. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of that out there. And
Yeah. It sort
it's
of makes
unfortunate.
everyone, yeah, distorts things.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I see people, I always try to relate to a certain degree as much as I can. Doesn't matter, like, race, color, creed, age. The other day, I opened up. I was going to the Holt to buy some perfume for my mom. I think it was Mother's Day, and I held the door open for this lady around my age, and she said, "I don't need you to do that for me." And I said, "Hold the door," and she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I hold the door open for everybody." She goes, "Yeah, because you're going to ask for my number next." And I said, "No." And she walked through, and I stood there holding the door, just thinking odd. And this little old lady comes by, and she said, "Sweetheart, you can hold the door open for me anytime you want." And it's like, okay, good, reality check. And yeah, I mean,
We
I
have so
just,
many stories in our heads that we project onto people.
yeah, humans are funny, and everybody's got their luggage, and everyone has their stuff to deal with, and
Yeah.
that's all right, and it's good, and I think that if more people talk about their insecurities or fears, the more they realize everyone else has them too, and it's not just you going through it. And I guess there's comfort in knowing that you're not alone. And yeah, so it's not that bad. I have a
Yeah.
pretty good life.
Yeah. Well, tell me, in the good life kind of projection here of the future, well, what would you hope for yourself? Like, because you seem like you're really still just dismantling this thing as it goes, right? And you mentioned still having armor and different things like that. What do you hope for yourself in, I don't know, the next 2 years in
Well,
terms of this kind of piece around your body?
I know there's like these programs that the VGH, the burn unit, puts on, and people talk to kids. And I thought, I don't know how I could fit into a program like that, but I think it would be nice, because I remember being that age and feeling so alienated that it would have been nice to have a mentor in that kind of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
That would be something I'd be interested in trying. Aside from that, just be a little easier on myself,
Yeah.
right? And not be so worried maybe about what everybody might think, because yeah, you can't please them all.
Well, it's interesting. It's almost like, when we have a trauma, let's say at 8, 9 years old, it's almost like there's a part of our brain that stays 8, 9 years old, I find. And it's like, it almost like is brought into the adult self. And it's like every now and then that little, like, 8 or 9-year-old sort of manages our social life or manages the way we feel. And we're like, aren't you an 8-year-old? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I should keep you
Yeah,
around.
yeah.
No, like, you go back to 8-year-old.
Well, I think I think I've become an 8 or a 9-year-old again because my son's at the same age, and I see me and him, obviously, and when I see him going through certain struggles, and I realize I went through similar struggles, I want to sort of support that for him. And
Yeah, I was actually going to ask
it.
you about like how this impacts your relationship with your son. It's interesting. It's almost like your son is there also to help you go through your life again, almost like in increments, and help you go and heal and
The whole
take care of.
cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's exactly where you got that trauma.
Yeah, I just wish, I kind of wish it happened in this day and age, because when I see the way he deals with other people, whether they are, blind or deaf, or, he thinks sign language is amazing, right? Like he looks at things with such a remarkable
Like an
innocence.
awe, like an awe.
Yeah. He saw this guy in a wheelchair, he's paralyzed from the waist down, and he says to him, he goes, "You're so lucky. You get to ride around in that cool chair all the time." And I'm thinking to myself, oh God, right? And the guy looks at me and goes, "You know what? It's pretty awesome." And you know, when I look at that through his eyes, I want that world.
Yeah, like that
So,
kind of like innocence and way of not going into like the predetermined way of thinking, like the politically correctness, but
right.
kind of more authentic and real and creative. Like it's who'd have thought of looking at it that way, you know?
Yeah, it's so different. I mean, and it's great. I mean, I think it's wonderful when I look at the world through his eyes. And when I look at like even things like race, right? I mean, we watched because he wanted to read a famous author, North American author. We watched Huckleberry Finn. Well, I neglected to remember what Huck Finn was all about with the slavery. And when Alexander saw this, he looked at me in outrage. He's like, "Why are they treating him like that?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I forgot all about this. How am I going to explain this?" So, you know, to talk to him about things like that when he just doesn't see that at all and doesn't understand the history of it all, I just think that's amazing. I'm embarrassed to explain our past, you know,
Hmm.
to him, and you know, I don't even want to, right? It's horrible, right? It's
Yeah.
so, and I just love the way he views everything, and he doesn't see me any different, and it's time I don't. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess maybe he spurred it on all that toothpaste in the sink.
He's your little healer in your life.
Yeah, he's definitely, yeah, he's awesome. So
Yeah.
yeah, pretty proud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add on this whole journey of body shame and overcoming it. And sounds like you're really at the brink of like dismantling it and still in it a little bit. And
Yeah, I'm an aggressive person. I see a problem, I want to fix it. I've always been a fixer, and so I guess with the prednisone gone and emotions there, and I see this issue, and I don't want it to be an issue. So the only person who can make change is myself, and I thought, well, if I could, you know, talk about my situation, and other people could make that change in themselves or feel inspired in any way because of that, then I want to be a part of that person's life. Like I want to build a house to be part of that person's life. So I want I want that for somebody else. I
mhm,
mean, I got to figure it out still a lot for myself, and you know,
yeah.
be brave. But it's a
Well,
start.
yeah, well, I'm just curious, like, yeah, because this whole thing around emotions arriving now, like this new discovery, like, oh, there's emotions in the world. Um, like, so what's that practice going to be for you with emotions now? Like, how are you going to deal with that?
I write.
Yeah,
It's
so
safe.
true.
You could write your feelings down, and you know, just keep them in a book, and then read them the next day, and it's, you know, it will make you smile, and you'll think, okay. So for me, that's helpful. And I talked to Alexander about his feelings, and that's helpful. And the funny thing is, my father, who we've called Spock our whole life, this man has no emotions, none whatsoever. Um, he actually had to start prednisone about 7 months ago, and we sat in his backyard this summer at a distance, because you know he's older and he's worried about COVID. And he said to me, "Can I ask you a question about the prednisone?" I said, "Sure." Did it do something to you? And I'm like, so I looked at him, I'm like, do you got a rush of emotions and feelings, Dad? And he's like, "Oh my God, you too?" I said, "Yeah, you trained me pretty good to keep those things at bay." And he said, "You know, your niece came over and mowed the lawn the other day." And I said, "That's nice." He goes, "I thought it was so nice. I started crying." And I said, "What?" Like, "You got emotions now?" And he goes, "They're horrible." I said, "Yeah, they take some getting used to." I said,
That's so
"Yeah,
funny. It's like it sounds like there's a great like story opportunity here where it's like, like someone who never knew about emotions and like something happens like when they're 40 or 50 and like suddenly there's this whole thing that happens. You're like,
he
I just
hasn't had him for 75 years. 75 years. This man has said, 'I love you' once in my life during a very traumatic experience." And you know, he doesn't have emotions. He doesn't talk about emotions. He doesn't share about it. He does with my mom, right? They're a phenomenal couple, but that's it. That's the extent of it. And so, you know, for him to get these late onset emotional, it's so funny because
like that tickle, like what's that tickle, Remco?
we laughed, and at the same time we started crying. I'm like, it's messed up. And yeah, yeah. So I'm just like, so this is what it feels like to be normal. I don't like it. No good. So yeah, it's you know, my rheumatologist, she says, Remco, it's a blessing. It's about time. And I was like, great. You got anything for it? Can I take something? She's like, no, you'll figure it out. So I kind of feel good that my father's in the same boat. So I figure if he can figure it out, I can figure it out. We'll figure it out together.
Interesting, this kind of like this sort of like father lineage, you know.
I put it more like misery loves company.
But there's this man, I don't know if you've ever heard of this man called Caspar Hauser. He was like some like duke in Germany, like way back in the 19th century, but they wanted to like eliminate him because he was going to become the next count. So as a kid, they knew he was going to be inheriting power. So they put him in a closet and they put no light, no nothing. He had no physical contact, and the door was closed, and they'd put the food under, I guess, under the door. And I think when he was 40, he came out and he had to learn to walk. He had to learn to have balance. He needed to, you know, he was like almost a beast, you know, and he had to relearn what it means to be this human, you know. And yet, like, his spirit was so strong that he became that duke eventually. Like, they thought they had destroyed this person, but he was able to like get all those faculties back into shape to be able to, like, you know, eventually step into that role of that powerful, you know, leader, whatever it was. I don't know all the details, but I just think it's kind of cool that way with this whole thing with the emotions. Like, there's all these things that are like not there, and suddenly it's like they come, and this is part of this humanity that is to be discovered. And it might, you know, like, who knows where it's going to lead you to with this whole writing and everything, right?
It's nice. It's nice. It's odd, and it's made me do things I've never done, and it's an interesting voyage. It's started, and I'm thankful, and at the same time I'm leery, and I've bought an awful lot of lunches for a lot of homeless people. I just yeah, it's good. It's like a little bit of a rebirth, like this Duke.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can be thankful that it's happening to me now in my 40s, and it happens to my dad in my 70s. Means I'm able to figure it out before he will.
It's kind of cool, like, you know, your dad, you, and your son, there's something happening with all of you at the same time.
I think the boy's got it figured out. I mean, yeah, if I could be like him, I'd be pretty happy. You know, he says, "Oh, you're my hero," and I'm like, "No, you don't understand. You're my hero." So, yeah, we have this hero thing back and forth, and yeah, I want the world like he sees it. I think it'd be a nice place to be.
Yeah. Well, I'll finish with this. There's this thing that Friedrich Nietzsche came up with. He says, first, you have to be the lion and, you know, tear everything to pieces, like the reality to pieces. And then you have to be the camel, and you have to go through the desert. And then the third one is you have to become a child again and see things through the eyes of a child. Like, everything's new, you know? And that's like the state of grace.
Well, good. I could use more grace. I think yeah, I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
thank you. Yep. Do you have any final big things you want to add? Your little words of wisdom?
I don't know if they're words of wisdoms, but no, I got nothing to add. That's about the most I've talked about myself in a long time. So I'm good.
Thank you for sharing that on Facebook with everyone that's watching us.
You're welcome. Gonna go hide now for a while.
Yeah, well, that's fine. We'll let you do that. Well, thank you, Remco, for coming and sharing such intimate stories, and yeah, and like being so, where you're at exactly, and just sharing what's going on for you. So I'm hoping that everyone got something, and I'm sure they did. So thank you for being so authentic and real with us.
My pleasure. I was
And
pretty nervous.
yeah. And I will invite everyone next week. I have this beautiful woman that I met actually. I organized an event in February, just before the COVID thing happened. It was called the CoCreativeSex Summit, and there was all different workshops to help people understand sexuality at another level that we, normally do think of it. And she came as one of the helpers with another facilitator, but she was. I discovered a whole world with her after being an artist, and I follow her on Instagram now, and she's just very creative, and her whole approach is she does artists and performance, but she deals with themes of sexuality, pleasure, and love, but in a way that's usually like just breaks our way of normally thinking about it. So anyways, her name's Sura, and she's going to be on the Co-Creative Dialogues next week. So anyone that wants to come and listen, it's on Tuesday. No, Monday too. She can only come on Monday, so it'll be a Monday show.
Mondays are good.
Yeah. Well, I find them a little rough because it's like your whole week starting. It's like, it's gonna be a little tough, but I can cope with it. Once I got my supper in my body, I was all right.
I like Mondays because it's, you get into the trenches and you it's a good. I like starts, right? I like mornings, so I like Mondays. They seem to go hand in hand. Yeah. It's the beginning of a week. It's got a lot of things to hold for you, so I like them.
Yeah. It's like that sort of like breaking the ice kind of feeling, like it's all there to conquer.
Right. Go in and attack it. I like that. I like the aggressiveness of that. Like, it's time to go get things done. Weekends, you can recap, but Mondays, it's time to line up the troops. Nail
it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. I'm going to just take us off Facebook Live.